Buried in the quiet corners of the Lincoln Park Historical Archive, I was leafing through a first edition of the Federalist Papers when a familiar voice disrupted the calm. "Still playing historian, Natalie," my brother Damien called out, smirking from the doorway. "Ever think about living in the real world?" I glanced up to find him impeccably dressed, his navy-tailored suit clashing with my cardigan and jeans. His watch glinted under the reading lamp. Probably the latest Audemars Piguet. Some things never changed. "Hello, Damien," I said coolly, sliding the book back into its climate-controlled drawer. "Didn't expect to see you in a place without stock tickers." He stepped inside, the scent of expensive cologne following him. "Dad sent me. He's nervous you'll ruin the vibe at their 40th anniversary dinner tonight." Damien scanned the archive like it offended him. You know, a curator in the family? It still baffles him. Not exactly cocktail party brag material. Natalie Whitaker, 33, director of the Chicago Historical Archive. To my family, founders of Whitaker Capital Group, I'm the odd one out. They value legacy, power, and visibility. I value truth, discretion, and knowledge. "I'll be there," I assured him, rising to meet his gaze. "And don't worry, I'll wear something investment banker approved." "Good," he replied, flashing that boardroom smile. "I'll be announcing our new acquisition. Whitaker Capital just absorbed 3 tech startups. It's our biggest move yet." "That's great news," I said evenly, though my stomach tightened. He studied me. "Still time to pivot, you know. We could always use someone like you in our data research division. At least then you'd be contributing." I almost laughed. If only he knew. My quiet work in this archive was a front. Beneath it, I ran Lumina Analytics, a stealth mode AI intelligence firm now evaluating several government contracts. "I'm doing just fine, Damien," I replied, walking him out with a polite smile. As soon as he left, I slipped back into my office. On the surface, it looked like any other historian's workspace, but behind a locked door, I powered up a military-grade server. The next move in my empire was already in motion. And tonight, the real announcement wouldn't be his. Behind the locked door of my archive office, I powered up my custom-built, high-sensitive computer. As the biometric scanner confirmed my identity, a welcome screen lit up with encrypted channels from Osaka, Paris, and Boston. "Good morning, Miss Whitaker," my assistant Lena greeted me crisply. Her video feed was crystal clear despite the distance. "The Halberg acquisition packet is ready for your final review." "Thanks, Lena," I said, scanning the documents. "Legal team?" Green lights. Due diligence is complete. We're ready when you are." Glanced at the vintage clock on my wall. Just under 6 hours before my parents' anniversary gala, schedule the signing for 8 a.m. tomorrow, and line up a press release for noon. "All ready queued," she said, then hesitated. Are you sure about the timing?" Damien's smug grin flashed in my mind, his condescension, the years of being dismissed as the quiet one. This wasn't just business anymore. "Absolutely, it's time," I said firmly, ending the call. I leaned back, taking in the quiet hum of the server rack beside me. Whitaker Insight Group, known in financial circles only by coded subsidiaries, had grown from a single analytics algorithm I wrote in grad school to a $70 billion, 0 cents, force across AI, private equity, and supply chain optimization. All while my family thought I spent my days cataloging old maps. I loved my work at the archive, but it also gave me the perfect cover. No one questions the librarian. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Remember to style your hair. The Hastings will be there tonight." Of course, the Hastings, another old money family Dad was still chasing approval from. "Will do," I replied. I closed the server connection and headed out. My first stop, a private salon nestled inside a River North high-rise I owned under a different name. "Nat?" Emma greeted me with a grin as I stepped inside. The place was empty, as always. Perks of silent ownership. "Usual today?" "Something more formal," I replied, settling into the chair. "Big family event." As she worked, I reviewed the final Halberg contract on my secure phone. By morning, Whitaker Insight Group would own the very AI firm my brother had spent a year trying and failing to buy. Emma glanced at me in the mirror. They still think you're the bookworm, huh? We smiled. For about 12 more hours. And after that, the entire family would learn the truth, on my terms. Would you like the next scene at the anniversary party? While Emma curled the last strand of my hair, she casually mentioned, "Your brother was here earlier, bragging about buying some huge tech company." "He's trying to buy it," I replied with a calm smile. "There's a difference." She met my gaze in the mirror, eyes sparkling with curiosity. Let's just say tomorrow's headlines will make for interesting reading. 4 hours later, back in my Gold Coast apartment, I stood before the full-length mirror. The transformation was subtle but powerful. Gone was the reserved historian in flats and glasses. In her place stood a woman who could confidently walk into any Fortune 500 gala without raising eyebrows. The deep navy Valentino gown I wore skimmed the floor perfectly. Elegant, timeless. My jewelry was carefully chosen, heirloom pearls and a Cartier watch. Quiet nods to wealth without any need to shout. I looked exactly as my family expected, like someone trying to fit in. Another ping, a message from Lena. "Everything is finalized, press release set. Reveal it tonight?" "No," I typed back. "Let them enjoy the party, tomorrow is soon enough." As I arrived at the Whitaker estate, the sweeping driveway sparkled with Bentleys, Teslas, and Aston Martins. I pulled up in my black Audi A6. Clean, classic, and very librarian. No one questioned it. Roy, our longtime family butler, greeted me at the door with a warm nod. "Welcome back, Ms. Natalie. Your parents are in the main hall." Inside, the air buzzed with elegance. The soft clink of baccarat crystal, a string quartet's gentle notes, and polished conversations formed the soundscape of old Chicago wealth. "Natalie, darling, you look presentable," my mother called from across the room. From Hannah Whitaker, that was practically a standing ovation. At 65, she wore elegance like armor. Tonight, she was radiant. Her silk gown sculpted to perfection, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier's light. "Happy anniversary, Mom," I said with a warm kiss on her cheek. "Your father's by the fireplace," she replied, already scanning the crowd for the Hastings or another family worth impressing. "Don't disappear into the library just yet." As I wove through the guests, I was met with polite air kisses and the usual patronizing smiles. "Still at the archive?" "Oh, that's sweet." Their words always teetered on condescension. "There's my girl," my father's booming voice rang out. He stood at the fireplace, surrounded by golf buddies and board members of half the city's institutions. I smiled, because tomorrow, they'd all find out who really bought Halberg AI. "Would you like to continue with the revelation scene at breakfast, or a press conference the next day?" "Come here, let them see you," my father boomed, pulling me into a surprisingly tight hug. His words were slightly slurred. He'd clearly started celebrating early. "Still buried in dusty old manuscripts, huh?" chuckled Peter Hastings, one of my father's golf buddies. His tone made it sound like I was still playing dress-up. "Yes," I replied smoothly, "still preserving knowledge for future generations." Their laughter followed, light, patronizing. The kind reserved for relatives who've chosen a path they don't understand. "Speaking of future generations," Dad said, puffing up with pride, "where's Damien? He's got an announcement." As if summoned by praise, Damien strode in, all swagger and champagne. His tuxedo was custom, his watch unmistakably Patek Philippe, and his grin unmistakably smug. "Everyone," he called out, effortlessly commanding the room. "May I have your attention?" The murmur of conversation faded. Damien lived for moments like this. "As many of you know, Whitaker Capital has been growing aggressively," he began, voice booming with confidence. "Tonight, I'm proud to share that we're finalizing the biggest acquisition in our firm's history. By next week, we expect to close on Halberg AI." Gasps and applause rippled through the room. My father beamed like a man witnessing his legacy bloom. My mother dabbed at her eyes theatrically. I sipped my champagne and waited. "It's not signed just yet," Damien admitted, "but all the paperwork's in place. Legal has reviewed everything. It's ours. Just a matter of time. That's my boy, Dad roared, slapping his back. Always knew you were destined for the top. As the crowd clustered around him with congratulations, Damien's gaze found me. He raised his glass in my direction, smirking. What about you, little sis? He asked loudly. Ready to admit you chose the wrong path? Or are you still playing librarian while we build real empires? I met his stare without flinching. I think, I said carefully, that you shouldn't count your acquisitions before they clear regulatory. If you laughed, but not as confidently, Damien's smile twitched. Still speaking in riddles, he muttered. That's why you'll always be where you are. Reading about greatness, instead of achieving it. Perhaps, I said, taking another sip. But at least I do my due diligence. He bristled. He never liked when I used precise language, especially when it implied I might know more than he did. Due diligence, he repeated. I've got the best lawyers in the business. Everything's buttoned up. I clinked my glass to his. Well then, I said with a smile. I guess we'll both see tomorrow. He frowned slightly, but before he could respond, our mother's voice rang out. Dinner is served. The crowd began to file into the dining room, all carved mahogany, vintage crystal, and whispered legacies. And tomorrow, the room's balance of power would shift forever. Would you like me to continue with the reveal scene the next morning? If you've been quietly rooting for Natalie from the shadows, now's the time to hit subscribe. Because in the next chapter, the empire she built in silence finally steps into the spotlight. As the guests drifted toward the dining room, I felt a curious mix of amusement and quiet satisfaction. Tomorrow was coming fast, and it would be one to remember. I took my assigned seat at the long polished mahogany table and couldn't help but notice my placement, tucked away near the far end, far from the center of attention. It was subtle, but deliberate. These things always were. Across the room, Damien held court like a prince in his element, laughing loudly, gesturing dramatically, soaking up the praise. I smiled politely when needed, but spent most of my time appreciating the chef's work on the rosemary duck. Beside me, Eleanor Hastings leaned over, her perfectly coiffed hair gleaming under the chandelier. You were always so bright, Natalie. Everyone thought you'd do something extraordinary. Why waste all that on old books? I paused, letting the question hang in the air before replying evenly. Books teach us more than facts. They teach us how to read between the lines, to see what others miss. She blinked, unconvinced. Well, at least your brother is doing something that matters, she sighed. It must be hard, watching him shine. It's not as difficult as you might think, I replied with a gentle smile. Dinner continued with the usual blend of passive praise and quiet dismissals. Jabs hidden in smiles, judgments softened with champagne. I'd grown used to it all. Insults, dressed as concern, were the family's specialty. When dessert arrived, a trio of flourless chocolate cake, raspberry coulis, and caramel tart, Damien stood, glass lifted high. To Mom and Dad he tells Vice rich with pride, who taught me how to win, and to my sister Natalie, who reminds us all that success takes many forms, some louder than others. Laughter, polite but pointed, echoed across the table. I raised my glass too, though my mind was already turning toward the morning press release scheduled for 9:00 a.m. Later, by the dessert table, Damien found me again. Enjoying yourself? He asked, smugness practically radiating off his tailored jacket. It's a lovely evening, I replied, sipping my espresso. Our parents must be proud. They are, he said, adjusting his cufflinks. Would have been nice if both their kids had built something impressive. I picked up a chocolate truffle, turning it between my fingers. You know, Damien, success isn't always about who shouts the loudest. He smirked. Tell that to my portfolio. How much does a librarian even make? I glanced down at my Louboutin heels. Enough to afford these. I've always been good with investments. He drained the last of his champagne in a single gulp. Well, Damien said, patting his pocket for his phone. This has been fun, but I've got people to impress and a company to acquire. Big day tomorrow with Halberg. He swaggered off, still riding the high of his premature victory. Once he was out of view, I slipped my phone from my clutch and typed a message to Lena. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" Her reply came instantly. "All systems go. Press release at 8 a.m. Want the final numbers?" "No need," I texted back, a smile tugging at my lips. "I'll read them in the headlines, alongside everyone else." By midnight, the party was fading. I offered my goodbyes, enduring one last chorus of passive critiques. "You really should consider Damien's offer," my mother whispered as I kissed her cheek. "A role in the corporate library would suit you perfectly." "I'll think about it," I replied gently. I wouldn't. Driving home, city lights flickering on the windshield, I thought of what the next sunrise would bring. For 8 years, I had been the afterthought, the eccentric daughter who chose libraries over leverage. But in a few hours, everything would change. At 7 a.m., I unlocked the side door of the Chicago Historical Archive, just like I had every weekday for years. My sensible flats clicked softly against the marble floors. To the public, I was still Natalie Whitaker, head librarian. Nothing unusual. Lena was already there, her blonde hair pulled back, tablet in hand. Here, she was assistant archivist. Outside, she was the COO of Whitaker Insight Group. "Everything's prepped," she said, stepping into my office. "Osaka's online, and the press release is queued. Goes out in 45. I set my bag down, powered up my secure laptop, and asked, "Any movement from Damien's team?" "They're gearing up now, still convinced Hallberg is theirs." She allowed herself a grin. "Let's give them a few more minutes of blissful ignorance." At exactly 7:15 a.m., my private line lit up. I answered. "Miss Whitaker," said a calm voice through the interpreter. "The Hallberg board is assembled and ready." "Excellent," I replied. "Let's begin." The next few minutes were swift and surgical. E-signed contracts, confirmations, and official seals. By 8 a.m. in sharp, Whitaker Insight Group had legally acquired Hallberg AI and all of its global subsidiaries, proprietary patents, and advanced R&D pipelines. "Press release is live," Lena said, eyes on her screen. I opened my browser. Across every major news outlet, the same headline was breaking. "Librarian no more. Natalie Whitmaker. Acquire Hallberg. Hallberg I in stunning. $4.20 Beetover." The mystery buyer acquires Hallberg AI. Global intelligence firm Whitaker Insight Group reveals founder's identity. Wall Street stunned as archivist turned tycoon unmasked. My phone vibrated non-stop, news alerts and calls flooding in. Unsurprisingly, the first call was from Damien. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. No greeting, just pure disbelief wrapped in fury. "Good morning to you too, brother," I said evenly, sipping my coffee. "I take it you've seen the headlines?" "This is a joke? Whitaker Insight Group? You're not the founder." "I am. Have been for 8 years now." I paused, letting the words land. "I get the confusion, though. I mean, I'm just a librarian, right?" On the other end, I could hear rustling, papers being flipped, voices shouting in the background. Damien was scrambling. "But I had a deal," he said. "Everything was in place. Contracts, signatures." "Was it?" I asked, voice laced with mock innocence. "You may want to check the fine print. We've been in talks with Hallberg for months." "So have we," I cut in. "My team, my company, my empire." Each pause felt like a hammer dropping. "The one I built while you were too busy dismissing my career as academic trivia." There was silence. Then click. He hung up. Across the room, Lena was struggling to suppress a smirk. "How long until your parents call?" I glanced at the clock. Right on cue, my mother's name lit up the screen. "At Leelise Whitaker," she snapped, sharp as shattered glass. "What in the world have you done?" "Good morning, Mom," I replied, cheerful. "I'm a bit tied up, but perhaps we can catch up over dinner?" "Dinner? Do you understand the chaos you've caused? Your father's phone won't stop ringing. The Hastings, the golf club board. Everyone is asking how our librarian daughter just bought Halberg AI. Behind her, I could hear my dad barking instructions, flipping between phone calls like a panicked broker. "Tell her to get over here now," he shouted. "I'm in meetings all day," I said truthfully. "This acquisition is just the start, but I'd be happy to host dinner." "My place, 6 o'clock?" There was a long pause. "You mean that shoebox near the archive?" "No," I replied. "I mean my penthouse on Calm Avenue." I smiled, already composing the address in a text. There was a long, disbelieving pause. "Calm Avenue?" my mother repeated. "But that's the most expensive building in the city." "Is it?" I replied lightly. I hadn't noticed. "See you at 6, Mom." I ended the call and exhaled slowly. 8 years of silence, secrecy, and double lives, all unraveling in one breathtaking morning. My reflection stared back at me from the laptop screen, calm and composed. "Ready for phase 3? Lena asked, standing just behind me. I gave a slight nod. "Do it." Within minutes, the second press release hit global newswires. Withhold. On September 11th, I took hold on September 16th to achieve uncertainty. This deal had been months in the making. An intricate, multi-layered merger with 3 of the most powerful innovation firms in Seoul, Singapore, and Tokyo. We'd timed its announcement to follow the Hallberg acquisition, making our message unmistakable. This wasn't luck. This was legacy. And it belonged to me. By the time my family stepped into my home that evening, 2 of the decade's most disruptive business moves would bear my name, and the world would finally know who Natalie Whitaker really was. The rest of the day unfolded in carefully orchestrated stages. A call with my Tokyo partners, a virtual strategy session with legal, and a single, quiet interview with the Wall Street Journal. "A background in library sciences?" the reporter asked, baffled. "It teaches you how to manage chaos," I said with a smile, "to curate meaning from massive volumes of data. Information is power, always has been." By 7:10 p.m., I stepped out of the archive's rear exit and into the waiting car that would take me home. My real home. The penthouse atop 75 Calm Avenue, a glass-encased sanctuary in the sky. I'd lived here for 6 years, while maintaining a modest studio near the library to keep my cover intact. It was in this penthouse, surrounded by high-speed global infrastructure, discreet security, and a full-scale operations suite, that the empire was actually run. The elevator chimed precisely at 6:00 p.m. Damien stepped out first, visibly rattled, his bravado stripped to the bone. My parents followed, my mother pale, my father unusually quiet. Even Roy, our long-serving butler, looked stunned. "Welcome to my home," I greeted them, motioning toward the panoramic view of the lake glittering beneath the sunset. Damien's voice was tight. "How long?" Moved to the bar, poured myself a glass of scotch and turned to face him. "How long have I been lying?" I clarified. "I haven't. Everything I said was true." I raised the glass. "I am a librarian. I do love books. I just also happen to run a global financial empire." "But why?" my mother asked, her voice trembling as she sank onto the edge of the cream-colored Italian leather sofa. "Why keep it from us? Why the deception? Why let us believe that I was a failure?" I finished for her, setting a crystal tumbler filled with elderflower tonic on the coffee table in front of her. "Maybe because you never looked past the story you wanted to see." I met her stunned gaze. "You saw a bookish daughter who turned her back on business, one who chose silence over ambition. But silence isn't weakness, it's strategy." My father stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's skyline reflected in the glass. "All this time," he muttered, "those acquisitions, those anonymous investments, it was you? Whitaker Insight Group?" Damien said, his voice flat. "You're the mystery competitor? The one everyone's been scrambling to unmask?" "The shadow empire," he added bitterly. "The one reshaping markets while we were all chasing headlines." I allowed myself a small smile. "I prefer the term knowledge empire. After all, Dad, wasn't that what you always said growing up? Knowledge is power." He turned to face me, really looked at me, for the first time in years, not as an embarrassment, but as something unfamiliar, respected. The Halberg deal, he asked slowly. How long were you working on that? 8 months, publicly, I said, but I've had controlling interests in their subsidiaries for over a year. Damien's eyes flared. You've been playing me? Not playing, I corrected. Competing. Isn't that what you always said you wanted? A fair fight? A real contest to prove who's better at business? It wasn't fair, he snapped. You had inside access, hidden teams, secret intel. I laughed softly, the sound echoing in the penthouse. You mean like the so-called tips you boast about picking up on yachts and over cocktails at the club? The ones whispered during charity galas and closed-door golf rounds? I set my drink down with a quiet clink. No, Damien. I built this with intelligence, with research, with discipline. Every move calculated, every risk measured. I looked at each of them in turn. This empire wasn't gifted to me, it was earned. With information, strategy, and a deep understanding of systems most people never take the time to study. Dinner that evening was a quiet storm of shifting dynamics. My mother tried to make sense of the decor, of my wealth. My father sat in silence, clearly replaying years of conversations through a new lens. Even Damien was quiet. No longer mocking, just unsettled. Eventually he cleared his throat. So, what's next? I met his eyes. A partnership. His brows lifted. Your company needs global integration, vision beyond legacy structures. I'm offering that. To my surprise, my father nodded. Maybe it's time you learned from her. As the final course was served, the quiet librarian they once overlooked became the future they had to follow. Damien's initial disbelief had softened by dessert. By the time we stood together in the kitchen reviewing a proposal draft, his skepticism had turned to curiosity, and then to cautious admiration. I underestimated you, he admitted, tapping his fingers against the counter. But I'm not making that mistake again. As the evening drew to a close, my mother lingered behind, eyeing me carefully. Why now, Natalie? She asked, voice quieter than usual. Why reveal everything tonight? I thought for a moment, then replied, because people need to see that success doesn't always wear suits and luxury watches. Sometimes it wears cardigans and carries library cards. To my surprise, Damien added, and maybe it's a reminder not to judge people by appearances. After they left, I stood by the window with Lena, watching the city glow. Stocks are already reacting, she said, eyes on her tablet. Analysts are calling the merger visionary. We knew the formal announcement was just days away, and maybe, just maybe, Damien would embrace this partnership fully by then. But tonight had been more than business. It was a quiet reckoning, one that shifted how my family saw me and how I saw myself. My mother's tearful apology, my father's prideful glance, they meant something. The next morning, I entered the Chicago Historical Archive as I always did. The regulars waved hello, asking if the new exhibit was still on track. No one mentioned Forbes or CNB. And that, to me, was the real victory. Because in a world obsessed with prestige, I had built something enduring. Not just with wealth, but with wisdom. I was still Natalie. Still a librarian. Still in love with stories. Only now, I was also a billionaire. After all, knowledge takes many forms, and sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one you never saw coming. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly written off by the people who were supposed to believe in you most, then you understand exactly why I kept building in silence. I didn't create my empire for applause. I didn't need validation, but I did need clarity. I needed to know that I could build something powerful without becoming what the world expected me to be. And now, standing here, I want to tell you, you don't have to shout to be strong. You don't have to fit into someone else's blueprint of success to change the world. So if you connected with my story, even just a little, leave a comment. Tell me what you're building, what you're hiding, what you're proud of in your own quiet way. I see you, you matter, and trust me, your story is more powerful than you think. Hit subscribe if you want to walk with me through the next phase, because this isn't just about money or power. It's about reclaiming your voice, your value, and your vision. And here's my advice to anyone who feels stuck in someone else's definition of worth. Don't wait for recognition. Build anyway. Keep showing up. Keep learning. Stay curious. You don't have to explain your dreams to people who've never dared to chase theirs. Success, real success, comes from alignment, not approval. So go ahead, break their expectations. And then, quietly, own the room.